Thank you for joining us for Safeguarding Sport from Corruption Towards UNGASS 2021. We will this afternoon discuss ways discuss ways in which the international community can safeguard sport from corruption. And UNODC is very grateful to be co-organizing this event with the permanent missions of Italy and the Russian Federation. For the United Nations, harnessing the potential of sport can help to promote peace and achieve the 2030 Agenda, which explicitly recognizes the role of sport as an enabler for sustainable development. However, we have seen how some have sought to exploit sport for illicit gain and profit, undermining its integrity and reducing its role in helping to achieve the 2030 Agenda. The international community is well aware of this, as demonstrated by the increased determination to use the tools of multilateral cooperation to counter corruption in sports and the improved understanding of the solutions multilateral cooperation can provide. The adoption of Resolution 7/8 by the Conference of State Parties of the UN Convention Against Corruption in November 2017 was a landmark moment for the international efforts to prevent and combat corruption in sport. In addition, the need for progress on this front was reiterated in 2 General Assembly resolutions last year and also highlighted in the high-level event UNODC co-organized along with Qatar, Italy, and Colombia last year on crime prevention and sustainable development through sports, in which the PGA also spoke. And we are trying to keep the focus on various aspects of how corruption impedes sustainable development as we move forward to the UNGASS that will be held in 2021, in the first half of 2021, and UNGASS to look at the problem of corruption. And this is just one of many events on the road to that UNGASS. And so UNODC has been bringing together over some time a wide range of stakeholders to help prevent corruption in sport, raise awareness, and deliver technical assistance to promote sports integrity and prevent the involvement of organized crime. UNODC, through its global program on safeguarding sport from crime and corruption, responds to the need for multi-stakeholder approaches for standard setting and capacity building. We have developed the expertise and the tools necessary to assist member states and sports organizations in tackling some of the most pressing issues that undermine the integrity of sport, and are available and willing to continue to provide the support to member states and others upon request. Today's event provides a timely opportunity to continue this momentum by raising awareness of the problem and sharing experiences, resources, and good practices in tackling corruption in sport as member states continue their preparations for the UNGASS on corruption that will look at the challenges and measures to prevent and combat corruption and strengthen international cooperation. Before we go to our distinguished guests here today, we would like to show a short video to set the stage of this problem.
Sport is fundamental for our health, general development and education. It is, and will continue to be, a key driving force behind sustainable economic and social development. It also helps promote and foster understanding and sustainable peace between athletes, teams, communities and countries through the promotion of shared values, efforts and ideals. In other words, the potential of sport to help push forward development, peace and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals is almost limitless. However, we have seen how corruption undermines sport's positive impact and blunts this potential. Examples of this damage include multiple and well-publicized official investigations into cases of endemic corruption in sport organizations, awarding of major sport events, bribery involving sport officials, competition manipulation, illegal betting, and reprisals against whistleblowers, to name but a few. Recognizing these threats, over 180 governments came together in November 2017 to pass a resolution to tackle corruption in sport during the 7th session of the Conference of States Parties to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. This convention, which entered into force in 2005, is the only universal, legally binding anti-corruption instrument. Key chapters of the resolution focus on measures that are designed to prevent and criminalize corruption, as well as to promote international cooperation and return the assets stolen through corruption. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, is the guardian of the Convention and supports states in their efforts to ratify and effectively implement the Convention. By using this key pillar of the international legal framework to adopt Resolution 7/8 on corruption in sport, the international community has clearly signalled its determination to fight threats to sports integrity. But what does the resolution contain? In less symbolic terms, the resolution effectively sets out a list of key policy recommendations which governments have agreed to implement. Let us now look briefly at what some of these recommendations are, bearing in mind this video represents but a short overview of the resolution. From a legal perspective, the resolution sets out the importance of using robust legislative and law enforcement measures to prevent and fight corruption in sport. In essence, with the resolution's adoption, governments are committing to using their legal systems and law enforcement powers to help tackle this problem. Effective cooperation, coordination and exchange of information linked to cases of corruption in sport between states parties can be improved, and the resolution makes this point. However, the need to strengthen cooperation between criminal justice authorities and sport organizations is also referred to, and is also an essential component in making the fight against corruption in sport more effective. As seen in other sectors, using partnerships to fight corruption can be very effective, and the resolution draws from such experiences to promote the importance of multi-stakeholder initiatives for the benefit of sport. Since the adoption of the resolution, we have seen the creation of global partnerships, such as the International Partnership Against Corruption in Sport, as well as partnerships at the national level, which help coordinate efforts at the local level. Needless to say, detecting those responsible for corruption in sport is crucial in order to protect its integrity. To help unmask the corruptors, the resolution focuses on 3 action areas. Firstly, it outlines the importance of encouraging the participation of society as a whole to help fight corruption in sport. Secondly, the need to raise awareness about the threat of corruption to sport is underlined. Thirdly, the resolution sets out in strong terms the importance of reporting persons and how they should be encouraged to come forward and protected when they do. The importance of sport to the advancement of gender equality and the empowerment of women has been repeatedly underlined in many forums, including in the UN General Assembly. It is widely recognized there is a strong gender dimension to corruption, and this is particularly relevant when viewed in a sport context, in terms of the different barriers that male and female athletes must overcome in order to succeed. This is clearly identified by the resolution, which urges states to take action to stop corruption from acting as a barrier for female athletes. Major sports events showcase the best that sport can offer. However, they can also provide significant opportunities for those wishing to exploit such occasions for illicit gain. In an effort to stop this, the resolution urges the organisers of major sporting events to address corruption risks linked to such flagship occasions, such as those related to public procurement, major infrastructure development, and financial management. To help organisers tackle these risks, the resolution also urges states to make use of the publication the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, a strategy for safeguarding against corruption in major public events. We have also seen how sport organisations can be used as vehicles for illicit enrichment by unscrupulous officials. From a good governance perspective, the resolution encourages those involved in sport to promote ethical practices and transparency in their organisations and to cooperate with any official investigations that are launched. The problem of competition manipulation is one that unfortunately has a long history. However, this issue, when combined with illegal betting, can have a particularly corrosive and long-lasting impact on a given sport if allegations of misconduct are made and proven. With this in mind, and through the adoption of Resolution 7/8, states parties have committed to review their legislation in the areas of competition manipulation and illegal betting to ensure their legal frameworks are fit for purpose. To help with this review, the resolution also suggests that states use the joint UNODC and International Olympic Committee publication entitled Model Criminal Law Provisions for the Prosecution of Competition Manipulation. What can we conclude from this short overview of the resolution? As a policy tool, the resolution sets out key actions that have or that need to be taken by the international community to fight the threat that corruption poses to sport. It also serves to showcase the growing understanding and appreciation that actions taken to safeguard sport from corruption, in fact, represent an investment with clear economic and social benefits for all. By proactively implementing Resolution 7/8 on corruption in sport, we can promote integrity, stop criminals from exploiting sport for illicit gain, and harness the power of sport as a force for development and peace. To find out more about the work of UNODC and the tools and resources available to help fight corruption in sport, please visit us at www.unodc.org/safeguarding sport.
And with that, I will now move on to our distinguished speakers. Our first speaker will be His Excellency Andrei Avitsyan, Ambassador for International Anti-Corruption Cooperation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation. Followed by Her Excellency Sheikha Alia Ahmed Al Thani, Permanent Representative of Qatar to the United Nations in New York. His Excellency Stefano Stefanile, Deputy Permanent Representative of Italy to the United Nations. His Excellency Andreas Rugeles, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Permanent Mission of Colombia to the UN. And my colleague, Ms. Daniela Bass, the Director of the Division for Inclusive Social Development of the United Nations Department of Social and Economic Affairs. And followed by my colleague, Mr. Ronan O'Lear, the Coordinator of the UN Office on Drugs and Crime's Global Program on Corruption and Crime in Sport. Ambassador Avetsayan, it's such a pleasure to have you here in this capacity, having so honorably served UNODC, directing our vast programs in Afghanistan. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Simon. Excellencies, Madam Director, dear colleagues, thank you for coming to this event, special event, which we see as an opportunity to discuss national and international experience, including the results of two conferences on corruption in sport held in Vienna in 2018 and 2019, as well as some ideas on the way forward in safeguarding sport from corruption. We express our gratitude to the co-organizers of the event. Special thanks go to Ronan and other colleagues in UNODC. Without your support, it wouldn't be possible. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last decade, the Russian Federation has hosted nearly 4,000 international sport competitions, including World and European Championships, Olympic Games, and the FIFA World Cup. This experience allowed Russia to establish a broad legislative framework that ensures the functioning of long-term mechanisms to regulate and guide the organization of major events with due account of corruption risks, and also help to improve the regulation and functioning of the national contracting system. Our good practices are set out in detail in the handbook, the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, a strategy for safeguarding against corruption in major public events, developed by the UNODC and funded by the Russian Federation. We consider partnering against corruption in sport as a priority for international cooperation, as crime, and in particular corruption in sport, has international, multifaceted, and highly unpredictable character. Pursuant to Resolution 7.8 on corruption in sport of the Conference of the States Parties to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, the Russian Federation, Italy, the BRICS countries, and the UNODC co-organized in June 2018 and in September 2019 two international conferences on safeguarding sport from corruption. A large number of member states, intergovernmental and sport organizations, and the private sector attended the fora, which proved the necessity of a concerted international action under the auspices of the United Nations to effectively defend sport from all forms of corrupt behavior. Demonstrating strong commitment and adopting pragmatic approach, member states should join their efforts in improving legal framework in which national and international sport organizations operate, introduce principles of good governance, and create the general climate of intolerance towards corruption in sport. It is fundamental, however, that this process be inclusive and impartial in accordance with the values of the United Nations and with the understanding that sport should not be exploited as a means of political struggle, but preserved as a value according to the Olympic Charter and promote peace and sustainable development. These objectives are set in Resolution 6.6, follow-up to the Marrakesh Declaration on the Prevention of Corruption of the Conference of States Parties to UNGASS, held in St. Petersburg in 2015, further developed in the Kazan Action Plan of 2017 and Resolution 7.8 on corruption in sport, and reaffirmed in the General Assembly Resolutions 73-24 and 73-190 and the report of the Secretary General strengthening the global framework for leveraging sport for development and peace of August 2018. The UN General Assembly Special Session Against Corruption in 2021 will be the right place and the right moment and time for adopting concrete measures in order to reach the above-mentioned objectives and to better understand that what we are dealing with, identify the most powerful tools for tackling the problem, establish the right framework for efficient cooperation among member states, the UN system, international sport federations and other stakeholders, and develop a shared vision and approach. Ladies and gentlemen, the two international conferences on safeguarding sport from Corruption held in Vienna proved that what we all need is better understanding of the scope and specificity of corruption in sport, as well as sharing best practice in the field. A result-oriented and efficient international cooperation should be based on adequate research, monitoring, and evaluation. Several speakers at the Vienna conference last September highlighted the necessity of a comprehensive study which could provide an in-depth analysis of the problem and existing experience of detecting and preventing corruption offenses in sport. It should also be mentioned that at the 2015 UNGASS conference in St. Petersburg, the states parties underlined the convention's importance as an effective mechanism for promoting good governance in sport and mitigating the risk of corruption that sport faces globally, and requested the development of studies, training, and materials, including guides and tools, to strengthen efforts in this regard. In Resolution 7.8, the conference requested the Secretariat, within its mandate, to continue to develop studies, training, materials, guides, and tools for governments and sport organizations, and to disseminate information and good practices to further strengthen measures against corruption in sport. In line with these provisions, the Russian Federation would like to propose to develop a thematic research project that could be managed by the UNODC and draw expertise from governments and key stakeholders, including academia, sport organizations, and others. The international conferences on safeguarding sport from corruption that were held in Vienna also brought about the idea to go further and set up a permanent global platform allowing for regular discussion and coordination of efforts to keep sport free from corruption. Therefore, we would like to propose to launch a Safeguarding Sport from Corruption Forum based in Vienna that could be used by member states and other relevant stakeholders. We invite all interested countries to consider this possibility and open a dialogue on modalities of such a framework. The forum could gather on an annual or biannual basis and be supported by an informal intergovernmental working group to maintain constant contact, systematically exchange information on good practices, and strengthen practical cooperation on a working level. Possible and logical option could be for the group of Friends of Sport uniting member states' missions here in New York to extend its activities to Vienna and open kind of a special anti-corruption chapter there. We hope that members of the group support this proposal and our friends in UNODC provide necessary organizational assistance. It is also fundamental to invest in the expertise of national practitioners and law enforcement authorities in detecting corruption in sport, as well as raise awareness in sport community in the areas related to sport and across society. Here, regular training, workshops, and seminars, educational projects, and social campaigns can help a lot. Such projects could be developed by UNODC together with the International Anti-Corruption Academy based in Vienna and other relevant institutions. Apart from education and training, these projects will help to establish networks of national authorities and experts involved in detecting and investigating sport-related corruption cases. Russia is ready to provide support to these activities. Ladies and gentlemen, the above-mentioned ideas can be elements of a resolution on corruption in sport of the forthcoming 8th Conference of the States Parties to UNGASS in Abu Dhabi in December, developing Resolution 7.8 of the last conference. The new resolution should contain a set of practical steps to be implemented by 2021 so that a report on the progress achieved be made at the UNGASS. We invite all state parties to the UNGASS to support such resolution and contribute to its preparation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Abbatissian. Is the co-chair of the Group of Friends of Sport for Development and Peace. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Simone. Good morning, everyone. Ambassador Fetisyan, Excellencies, distinguished participants. It's of great pleasure, of course, to co-host this event alongside the missions of Russian Federation, Italy, Colombia to the UN, and also UNODC. The event is especially important because sport plays a fundamental role in our lives. I would like to also focus as well on the national point of view. In Qatar, Qataris have no tolerance for corruption in sport or any other walk of life. Qatar is placed among the top countries in terms of preventing and fighting corruption as a result of continuous support for all anti-corruption issues, both local and international levels. And by promoting transparent and accountable governance in all its aspects at all levels. Qatar, in partnership with United Nations, established the first regional rule of law and anti-corruption center in 2011. The center has significantly increased the awareness on the need to combat corruption in the region. It acts as a hub for training and exchange of experiences and expertise through strategic partnerships. It also builds institutional capacity to meet international standards and national needs. The center has also facilitated a partnership between UNODC and a number of knowledge-driven institutions called the Anti-Corruption Initiative. This initiative produces a multilingual, comprehensive set of support tools for universities to integrate anti-corruption mechanisms in their programs. This is a very important program as the youth is particularly targeted, an important stakeholder of sports, of course. Also, Qatar hosts the Center for Sport Security, ICSS. It's an international non-profit organization established in 2010 to promote and protect the integrity and security of sport. As a matter of fact, Qatar uses sport as a key vehicle to empower young boys and girls to become socially responsible citizens by helping them build life skills to better cope with the daily life challenges and promote a culture of lawlessness. Also in 2016, Qatar established the His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani Anti-Corruption Excellence Award in 2016, actually in cooperation with UNODC, to showcase innovative approaches toward the fight against corruption from around the world, including in the area of sports. These remarkable achievements for Qatar they did not happen by chance. It is the result of the vision of His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of Qatar. His Highness has also worked diligently over the past years to develop Qatar's sports infrastructure and to ensure our own sports integrity standards are in order to ensure all Qatari sports is safe, fair, and inclusive. A very important sport institution is the Aspire Academy, established in 2004. It offers a vibrant educational environment and intercultural experience to develop athletes' academic and sport potential. Through personalized learning and training using modern technology, the Academy also develops responsible learners, inspires every athlete to make valuable contributions to the global community, and teaches the importance of safeguarding the integrity of Qatari sport. Academy graduates are not only athletes, but also future leaders in the area of sport, in so many other fields as well. Leaders that will work to prevent and combat corruption in all of its forms and manifestations, so that all Qataris can be confident that Qatar sports will continue to be clear, fair, safe, and inclusive. And of course, it makes me very proud, of course, here at the level of the New York community to co-chair alongside the Ambassador of Monaco, Ambassador Isabel Pico, the group of friends on sports for peace and development. It's another platform for all of us as well to discuss one of the key issues presented today on safeguarding sports for corruption. And I guarantee that we will definitely create a platform for bringing the issue to the discussion of the group of friends here in New York. I thank you again, Ambassador, for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for your remarks. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Ambassador Stefanili for remarks.
Can you hear me? Yes, I think you can. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it goes without saying that the Italian mission is very pleased to be part in this event. We were among the main promoters of Resolution 7/8 in 2017. Together with Russia, it has been recalled. We organized also these conferences in Vienna in 2018 and in September of this year. And I think all the other actors here around the table have played a special role. I mean, Qatar is co-chairing this important group of friends. Colombia took the lead in promoting the UNGASS in 2021. And obviously, UNODC coordinates the entire action in Vienna, not only in Vienna, and DES as well is playing a significant role. So I think you were successful in encompassing all the most relevant actors in this field. Sport, I mean, is universally recognized as a formidable vehicle for education, health, and inclusion, and it is an instrument that is often used to overcome cultural and language barriers and to spread the values of friendship, solidarity, and fair competition. And it's also a driver for social and economic growth, and this is mostly the subject of the group of friends that is co-chaired by Qatar and Monaco. But sport is also a thriving business, which makes high profits, and where there are profits, there is also a temptation for corruption. And in the case of sport, corruption can take the forms of illegal betting, match fixing, doping, frauds, and deviance in the adjudication of major sport events, or in the adjudication of related procurement or concessions, such as, for example, TV broadcasting rights. So corruption in sport has to be considered in this broad picture. There's been significant progress over the last years. Let me recall the London Summit in 2016, which, by the way, was the time when this IPAX was created, the International Partnership Against Corruption in Sport, that was mentioned also in the very informative video that was shown earlier. Let me also recall the work that was made during the G20 presidency of Germany in 2017. I was personally working on that, and I do remember there was a specific part dedicated to corruption in sport also in the Hamburg Declaration adopted at the G20 on that year. There have been also important developments at the regional level. Let me mention this Macolin Convention adopted within the framework of the Council of Europe some years ago, which entered into force, I think, on the 1st of September this year, following a series of ratifications from a group of countries, including Italy. So somehow we also contributed to the entering into force of this convention. And then obviously the landmark is Resolution 7/8, which has been described very effectively in the video. I agree with one of the remarks that were made in the video. That is, the main feature, or one of the main features of this resolution is the multi-stakeholder dimension. I mean, the fact that it calls on a variety of actors, not only governments, but also law enforcement authorities, Olympic committees, sport associations, and last but not least, also the private sector. This is indeed one of the most relevant features of the resolution. As the title of this event suggests, it is now time to go from issue advocacy to action. And so it is necessary that there is a strengthening of the dialogue and the cooperation of sport bodies, Olympic movements, and national committees with law enforcement authorities. From this point of view, we welcome the decision that was taken to host the plenary of the next IPAX in Abu Dhabi, back-to-back with the next conference of the state parties to the UNGASS. This is already per se a good decision. Let me also say that as Italy as the host country of some major sport events in the coming years, and I would mention Cortina World Ski Championships in 2021, and namely the Winter Olympic Games in Milan and Cortina in 2026. We feel a special responsibility in ensuring that the sport environment remains healthy and that sport continues to be a catalyst for the promotion of ethical values. As you may also know, every year Italy tables a resolution an omnibus resolution on crime, which does not deal specifically with corruption. This is the subject of a different resolution, but certainly it also includes references to this. And speaking of corruption, obviously it refers also to corruption in sport. Let me mention very briefly some things that we have done internally, domestically. For example, I would mention the fact that match fixing was introduced as a criminal offense in Italy already 30 years ago, in 1989. Since 2011, we have also established a national platform for coordinating activities to prevent and fight illegal betting and match fixing. And this operates under the umbrella and the coordination of our Ministry of Interior in Rome. We have also established a reporting system which has the intention to provide a shield to athletes and whistleblowers who denounce illicit conducts. I think the video mentioned specifically the role of whistleblowers. And finally, the Italian National Anti-Corruption Authority has developed with the OECD also a specific mechanism of surveillance of public procurement, mainly for major sports events. Let me also say, and this is something that has to do with my ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we recently established, only a few years ago, a senior diplomatic figure in our ministry who has the responsibility to coordinate all the anti-corruption activities carried out in the different public administrations in Italy. And it's an important figure that I think has enriched a lot our action in this sector. So it is time to think in terms of implementation of Resolution 7.8. Certainly, the UNGASS in 2021 will provide a unique opportunity in that regard, and we should already prepare for that. But let me also recognize the interesting proposals just made by the Russian colleague, by Ambassador Vetisian. This idea of thinking of a new resolution in Abu Dhabi at the end of the year, it's something that we will look at with great interest and attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Stefanil. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Ambassador Rugeles for remarks. And we're particularly pleased to have the ambassador with us here today because in his previous capacity, he was Secretary of Transparency of the Presidency of Colombia, which is a ministerial rank position charged with the fight against corruption. Ambassador.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to congratulate, first of all, to Russia for this initiative and also having today on the table Italy, Qatar, and also United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, which was very helpful for our work in Colombia. When we think about sports, the first words that came to our mind are most probably hard work, leadership, perseverance, teamwork, and success. However, due to the corrosive effects of corruption, this phenomenon is damaging and undermining the potential of sport by stealing the future of youth and the future of athletes and players. In all countries, without distinction, we are witnessing how corruption has become a true pandemic with a wide range of corrosive effects on our societies. But let me be clear here. Corruption is not only a problem that affects the public sector. It also affects the private sector. And we have to look at this. Public and private sector. And also, corruption is a global problem that disturbs the efficiency of government, decreases citizen confidence in institutions, and the ability of officials to solve public problems. Besides, it slows economic development, deepens social inequality, threatens the sustainability of the rule of law and democracy itself. In short, corruption has corroded the fundamentals, the social contract between citizens and state. Looking at the figures of the index of corruption perception of Transparency International, we find out that in 2/3 of the countries of the world, corruption has a strong presence. 2/3. And according to the data collected by the World Economic Forum, the estimated annual global cost of corruption amount at least 2.6 trillion, which represents 5% of the global GDP. So this is a really serious matter. We can look at different figures, and let me show you here 2 additional figures. One from the International Monetary Fund that has estimated that approximately 2% of the world GDP is lost in payment of bribes. And when we look at Latin America, corruption is ranked among the 4 in the problems of when we ask citizens what are the most grave or more acute problems for them, they ranked corruption as number 4. And in some countries, like Colombia, corruption is ranked in number 1. We have also in Mexico, Peru, corruption is among the 1 or 2 main problems. Besides problems as employment, security. So this is a very serious problem in the case of Latin America. And we are convinced in that regard that Colombia needs to continue advancing in being a more equitable, productive, and implacable society against corruption. In this sense, we have defined in the government of President Duque 4 strategic axes with very concrete actions to face the phenomenon of corruption, from a holistic understanding of it and with an integral vision. And the 4 axes are related to, 1, the understanding of the phenomenon and its impact on society. 2nd, the prevention of corruption through education and strengthening of ethics and integrity. 3rd, the strengthening of the coordination, the interinstitutional coordination. And 4th, the promotion of investigation and punishment acts of corruption. The government of Colombia strongly believes that this work, together with more information, more integrity, less impunity, and less indifferences, will make us prevail over the scourge of corruption. This is what we have labeled as the formula of the 4 I's. I repeat it: integrity, impunity, indifference, on this case, and also information. In this regard, we have developed along the last years a public policy on transparency, and by the way, you help us a lot, UNDC, on the developing of this public policy. We have included in our National Plan of Development a special chapter on legality and transparency. We have created many years ago the Secretariat of Transparency, which has a ministerial level at the Presidency of the Republic. And we have submitted to the Congress several bills to fight against corruption. And furthermore, and due to the managing effects of corruption in all levels of public life, reducing corruption and bribery has been included in the Global Development Agenda. As you know, the Sustainable Goal number 16, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions, recognizes the importance of anti-corruption efforts as a condition for a more sustainable world. But also, sport, and we consider sport is a powerful tool in achievement of the SDGs, and it can do it more broadly. Sports is related to a different level of each of the SDGs. Through sports, we can transmit messages of fairness and respect, mobilize resources, and promote healthy lifestyles. This explains why we recently created, less than a month ago, the Ministry of Sports in Colombia. We have signed the Pact for Transparency in Colombian sports, and also we have signed a special pact for the investment of resources in sport infrastructure at national level in Colombia. And thanks to the effort of official institutions and non-profit organizations, Colombia works for reconciliation and for keeping young people away from violence, crime, and drugs through sport programs. We have achieved a lot, but there is more to do. In the last decade, we have witnessed how, unfortunately, major corruption scandals have shaken international sport organizations due to the incredible amount of money involved in the sectors, more or less $145 billion annually. For all of that, corruption has not only become the transfer of wealth from the powerless to the powerful, but also a major barrier to sustainable development. There is a growing consensus, as we have seen today, that corruption is a critical issue. That is why, on last October 15, a couple of weeks ago, we have convened a regional conference in Colombia to identify opportunities to improve international cooperation and detect new tools to face the current challenges posed by corruption in our societies. Distinguished participants, corruption is also linked to other forms of national and transnational organized crime, such as terrorism, drug trafficking, money laundering, smuggling, illicit trade of arms, illicit vetting, and human trafficking. Corruption is driven by and feeds criminal activity, hence the importance of addressing this problem as part of our response to all forms of criminality. The United Nations Convention Against Corruption has elevated corruption from a national concern to one of international proportions and importance. It has established an international mechanism for developing and perfecting laws to confront corruption, and most importantly, it offers a set of tools to enhance global cooperation in the fight against corruption. However, enforcement of criminal law requires by the UNCAC prohibiting crimes of corruption by national leaders has been weak in many countries. We do believe that we need to do more than just criminalize corruption. We must strengthen our institutions in charge of preventing, detecting, investigating, and punishing acts of corruption. Perhaps, more importantly, we have to think out of the box, use new technologies as big data and analytics, and to create new and innovative measures to combat corruption. The government of Colombia believes that it is necessary to create an international anti-corruption court that will provide a forum for the prosecution and punishment of corrupt leaders who enjoy immunity in their own countries because they control the administration of justice. Only together and through innovative ideas like the International Anti-Corruption Court, member states from the UN will be able to ensure the fight against corruption in all its forms and expression as a major transnational challenge that undermines legality, hinders entrepreneurship, and prevents our society from reaching higher levels of equity and welfare for all. Dear friends, I would like to conclude indicating that if the international community doesn't fight effectively corruption, we are condemned ourselves to live with corrosive effects in society for many years, for more than 100 years of solitude, as Garcia Marquez wrote in his Nobel Prize work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Director Bass to give remarks, and many of you know her association with this issue, including, among many other things, preparing the Secretary General's report on sport for peace and development. You have the floor.
It is quite difficult, actually, thank you very much for having invited me. Thank you so much. It's quite difficult actually to add something new or different or enrich the conversation, starting with the video that was shown that already embraced so much of what has been shared now. And I'm really pleased to be here, maybe to bring a different perspective and add a different perspective that is a little bit more in-depth. An in-depth perspective when it comes to social development and therefore sport for development and peace. And when we find ways and means to eliminate or contain corruption, definitely we bring also peace in the society. So I would like to reiterate just a few points that have already been said. I would like to strengthen the social dimension of this conversation. And I would like also to explain maybe before what we do in the division, so to give an overview to those who might not be familiar with. The Division for Inclusive Social Development in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs for the department is the focal point globally for the whole UN system on social groups such as youth, older persons, persons with disabilities, indigenous peoples, and then issues such as family, of course, is also the focal point on cooperatives. And when we deal with all these different social groups and the family where they all interact, we try to look at ways to promote policies to reduce poverty, and sport can play a major role sometimes for some people, actually, to be taken out of poverty in various different ways, to promote decent jobs. And we just said that the sport, or if it is meant as an industry, can produce many jobs from tech, etc., etc. And to promote integration and inclusion, I'm very pleased that this word has been used quite a few times, because that's what we do in the division. We promote the inclusion of all people, of all abilities, and of all ages, also in sport, and reduce the inequalities, the social inequalities. The sport can play a very important role in this as well. Corruption in sport is not a new phenomenon, and I might say a few things that I already shared in my video message to Vienna a couple of months ago, even less. The first documented case of corruption in international sports is attributed to the athlete Eupoulos of Thessalia, Greece, who successfully bribed 3 of his competitors during the Olympic Games of 388 before Christ. So, I mean, there is quite of a tradition here, right? We have to deal with. Therefore, definitely there is the need to be a little bit more focused and coordinated on the issue, as it has been pronounced now through the various resolutions in place and very important meetings and fora that are taking place. I would like to mention the fact that, as it has already been said, the Kazan Action Plan on Sport addresses the problem of corruption, of doping, manipulation of sporting competitions, and it emphasizes the need for improvements in governance, as it has been said, throughout the sport and the institutions. But when it comes to the Kazan Action Plan and sport, I would like to make sure that I share with you the definition we embrace of sport. It's the definition of the Kazan Action Plan of 2017. It's beautiful. The definition of sport is not only in the traditional way, athletes, but it's also, it embraces, as I said, people of all ages, of all abilities, who enjoy playing sports or physical activities or dance, acting. So it's, or even games, such, if I think of the indigenous games, for instance. Of course, there are also the e-games, but that's another story, and actually they're not even regulated right now. So that could lead actually to corruption and other issues that haven't been mentioned here, but it's a really, really growing phenomenon I believe we should look at. So coming back to my social dimension, So when we talk about the Kazan Action Plan, I would really invite everybody to think about this definition, not only the traditional way of thinking of sport, but also the casual, etc., because that includes everyone. And so the ambassador of Colombia, for instance, you spent quite a few words about corruption, and you brought to my attention something I never thought before. Corruption, you said, steals the future of young people. But corruption, if we keep focusing on corruption and traditional sports, I will have to refine a little bit this thought of mine, because it just came while you were talking. So if we bring the focus only on the traditional forms of sport, then this undermines other athletes or other people who are practicing sport as defined by the Kazan Action Plan 2017. And it puts in the shade, for instance, athletes who have disabilities or other athletes, because the focus is mainly. So what happens then, and WIPO here is quite interesting, the World Intellectual Property Organization, to those products and services and goods that are prepared for instance, professional athletes with disabilities. We don't really focus about that, but also in that area, there is so much shade. But we're not focusing on that. So I'm just bringing this to your attention. It could be actually an area that we might wish to explore. So coming back to what I wanted to share with you, there are, as I said, various resolutions on corruption in sport, already mentioned, the one of the Kazan Action Plan. We have also the General Assembly resolution on sport as an enabler of sustainable development, and preventing and combating corrupt practices and the transfer of proceeds of corruption. And then the one of the Secretary General, the resolution entitled Strengthening the Global Framework for Leveraging Sport for Development and Peace, which is the one, thank you very much for mentioning that, the division I lead deals with. So we said corruption can undermine the great positive potential of sport and its contributing role to accelerating the achievements of the SDG. Sport is so important that it has been put in the preamble of the 2030 agenda that says, sport is an enabler of development and peace. So definitely it embraces all people of all ages, to leave no one behind, and all goals, 17 goals. I would like to share with you another thought. I really changed my speech, but I was stimulated by this conversation, and so I apologize if it seems a little bit scattered. Indeed it is, but I think that this is actually the reason why we're here, to share and to do some brainstorming. So definitely sport can be a force for good and enables people to express their full potential, and it benefits societies. So I looked at some principles that were already discussed about good governance at the European Union, I think in 2013. So there must have been an evolution since then. I found them interesting. To me, as I said, this area is kind of new because I look at sport from a different dimension. And it says that the framework and culture, so good governance in sport is the framework and culture within which a sport body sets policies, delivers its strategies and objectives, engages its stakeholders, monitors performance, evaluates and manages risk, and reports to its constituencies on various activities and progress, including the delivery of effective, sustainable, and proportionate sport policies and regulations. So in doing all of this, I would really invite to consider the social dimension of sport and all the various groups of population that sports embraces as defined by the Kazan Action Plan. Last, this is an organization where nations are united. This is your house. And whenever you decide to use the space of your house on sport for development and peace, the division I lead is very, very happy and more than ready to support governments and work very closely with colleagues. You know that I used to work there many, many years ago. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's nice. It is one UN family after all supporting each other. And now we go to Ronan Olair, who's the coordinator of our global program on corruption and sports.
Thank you very much, Simone, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'd like to say words of appreciation, in particular to Ambassadors Stefanile and Ambassador Avitisian. We've had the pleasure of having excellent support and cooperation with Italy and Russia on the issue of corruption in sport. So thank you for co-organising this event today. And also a word of appreciation to Ambassador Altani. I've had the personal pleasure of actually setting up the original project in the Rule of Law and Anti-Corruption Centre in Doha many years ago, and I'm glad to hear that things are going well, and we certainly hope to engage further as we go forward on this interesting path. And finally, Ambassador Rugelis, unfortunately I haven't been to Colombia, but I will be there in November of this year, where Colombia will be hosting a regional workshop on sports integrity. So I think that's something that we should flag and underline. I think it's another sign of the commitment and the interest that Colombia shows to this issue. And last but not least, of course, Daniela, who we really feel that this topic is something that we can really join forces on with DESA to promote further. So I'm the last speaker, so you'll have to endure me for a few more minutes. But I'd just like to maybe just start a presentation, if the technician can put it up on the screen. Great. Okay, so title and content. The first point: what is UNODC and why sport integrity? I think. I'll go over this really quite briefly, but I think it just helps to reiterate who we are as an organisation and what actually we stand for, before focusing on the third point, which is how do you strengthen sport, essentially. So what is UNODC? I think you're all quite familiar with the title, at least, but specifically there we're talking on issues of migration, smuggling of migrants, corruption, illicit firearms, terrorism, human trafficking, and cybercrime. And so we're getting all these mandates from principally the conventions against transnational organised crime and corruption. And just to insert the context of sport into some of these dimensions, there's anecdotal evidence, for example, of sport being used in the context of smuggling and illegal migration, where athletes are told that they are being recruited to be part of a special sports team. They're brought onto special buses. They're transported across Africa, normally to Europe, and they find out that they're not going to be playing football for Manchester United. They're going to be working on an illegal building site or something like this. So you've also got, so human trafficking. You've also got links here to cybercrime. So that links into illegal betting and match fixing. I'll talk a little bit about that later on. I think just after this meeting, we'll be talking actually about the power of sport to prevent violent extremism. So again, terrorism there as well. So all to say, UNODC, we have these mandates, these topics, these areas, and sport is just but one element that is cross-cutting. But UNODC, just to recap, there's about 2,500 of us, and we're based around 107 physical locations all across the world. I think it's important to underline that the scope and reach. So we have over 2,500 staff who focus specifically to support countries on addressing some of these issues. So, why sport integrity? And I think hopefully the video did a good job on this. But I just wanted to flag, and I was told in every good UN presentation you have to have at least one map. So you're getting your second map now, but. The point here is it's really fundamental. You know it very well, but what does the blue represent? And essentially, the blue represents a common appreciation and an understanding that corruption is a problem. This is a really obvious point, but it's really important to underline it again and again and again, because when you talk about this resolution on corruption in sport, is adopted by 186 states parties, it means that the discussion, the starting point is not whether or not corruption exists. No, the point is that there's a common agreed understanding that it does. Everybody knows that corruption is happening, and we'll have to do something. So it's not just a developing country issue, it's something that affects everybody. And I use this slide quite a lot, but it is an important one to underline. You heard that the convention, I won't go over that, but just to go back to the original point that this resolution was adopted within the context of this Convention Against Corruption. And some of the key words, just to bring them out again, we talk about fighting corruption in sport through multi-stakeholder initiatives, the problem of match fixing, the problem of illegal betting, whistleblowing mechanisms, so supporting athletes and officials to come forward and report wrongdoing, the need for effective legislation. This is all contained in the resolution. But the core of the point, the core of the presentation. So how do you actually go about strengthening integrity in sport? So we're focusing, UNODC that is, we're focusing on 3 areas. So A, awareness raising, B, capacity building, and C, technical assistance. So from an awareness raising point of view, I just want to, it's really important to go back to what is being done globally. So we talked about the Kazan Action Plan. And the Kazan Action Plan, it was passed in the context of UNESCO. I think this is a key point when we're talking about this issue, because UNESCO, we all know what it stands for, but the main interlocutor from a national point of view here would be sports and education ministries. But the problem we're dealing with here is corruption and crime. So who else should be involved in that discussion? And so UNESCO, through the Kazan Action Plan, there's a component 3 of that action plan, which talks about sport integrity. So it's already on the agenda, very much so, of ministries of education and sport. So that's one area where there's awareness raising needed and continues to be promoted. But I should also flag that in the context of the G20, sport and corruption is now a standing agenda item of the G20's anti-corruption working group. So again, I want to just highlight this again to show that there's a bit of momentum growing around this issue. It's something that doesn't seem to be going away. There's more and more interest. And then you can't see it very well there, but under the UNGASS guide at the top there, it should be the cover program for the conference that we helped organize with Italy and Russia about these. So we organized this conference on safeguarding sport from corruption. So essentially sharing the knowledge and the tools out there about what countries and sports organizations can do to combat this problem. And I should flag that we will be producing an official report of that conference, so it will be available for you all to see, and I'll just give you the address at the end of the presentation. And finally, and this kind of links into what I was saying earlier on about UNESCO, from UNODC's point of view, I mean, we're primarily focused, well, we've got strong focus on SDG 16. And that's why we want to try and introduce the topic of corruption in sport, to get basically to a point where people who commit crimes or are involved in corruption in sport are sanctioned. I mean, you've got sports sanctions, but you've also got criminal sanctions. And we need to get to that point, I think, and as is underlined by the resolution, where people need to go, you basically need to be punished when they do something wrong. Secondly, capacity building. So it's all well and good to talk about doing something. Let's fight the problem. But what exists? What has been done? And that's where UNODC we're really trying to push things forward. We don't want the resolution to be a paper tiger. We need to help governments and sports organisations tackle the problems. So I just wanted to flag a couple of tools that we've developed, and I'll start from right to left. And the first one, so we talk about match fixing. But what is match fixing? I mean, probably if you talk to a policeman on the street, he'll know how to investigate a burglary, a murder, or whatever. But how do you investigate match fixing? And that's the first step we took on this road, that we developed this guide, actually with the International Centre for Sports Security from Qatar, who helped support us with some resources. We developed a guide, which is now available in all UN languages, all official UN languages, on how to investigate match fixing. And there, I mean, it's a comprehensive document, but you can think of issues like, a sports person at the beginning of their career or at the end of their career, open, they're running out of time, their contracts are going down, if you're a tennis player and you're offered 10,000 to lose the second set, hey, why not? What I'm trying to say is in the guide you're going to get all these information points to look for when you're thinking about tackling this problem. So that's one of the guides available. We've got another one there, which is literally we finished it 2 weeks ago. It's called Reporting Mechanisms in Sport. In other words, whistleblowing. And so we talk about the need to protect whistleblowers. But actually, when you actually talk to sports organizations, they actually don't know what you're talking about. So what does a mechanism look like? How do you encourage sports players to come forward or officials and report wrongdoing? And I should say that we approached the problem originally from saying, okay, we need to fight corruption in sport. But we all know when you're talking to a sports official dealing with all the problems in sport, this can deal with, this is sexual abuse as well. There's violent conduct, there's all sorts of things. So we decided to enlarge in the scope of the publication to look at wrongdoing in sport. And so that guide, we did it with the International Olympic Committee. We had 42 international experts support us doing it, and that will be officially launched next Monday at the new headquarters of the International Olympic Committee in Lausanne. And that is also literally being translated into all official UN languages. Then moving across to the other document there, it's a model legislation. And this goes back to the topic of match fixing, but it's an important one. What happens if you're hosting an event in your countries and all of a sudden you hear that there's an allegation of match fixing, whether it's a World Cup or an Olympics? What do you do? I mean, every country in the world would have anti-fraud legislation, anti-bribery legislation, but is it applicable to a sports context? And I say this bearing in mind with one country in particular there's an allegation of 5 of its football players having fixed an international friendly, and the prosecutor went after them and accused them of treason. So treason, that was the only tool that he could find to go after an allegation of match fixing of a national football team. So, when it comes out of the blue like that, one thing you should think about preparing yourselves for is actually having legislation in place, or whether actually you need new legislation. You might already be covered, but to know what to do when there's a case of match fixing. And this guide sets out recommendations and model language that can be used. So those are some of the tools. We have a number of others, but I won't go into too much detail. And I wanted to spend just a moment on this IPAX initiative. And to summarize, so in the 1980s, in the 2000s, sport, the big problem was doping. It's still a big problem. But the approach to tackle it was an institutional approach. So the creation of the World Anti-Doping Agency. It's a large agency, structures, buildings, people, budget, annual budget. It's a big structure. But looking at the new threats, or at least recognizing or appreciating the threats of corruption to sport, coming out of the 2017 anti-corruption summit in London that was earlier referred to, was the creation of this partnership approach. So you work with partners, those who can bring added value to the problem. And what we've done so far, so UNODC, the Council of Europe, OECD, the International Olympic Committee are the core founders of this, the core partners, the keyword partner, of this initiative. And it's been slowly building, it's been organically growing, and we have task forces. So, for example, we've just created a new task force on how to promote effective cooperation between sports organizations and law enforcement bodies, because we have to bear in mind that, in the zeal to fight corruption, we also need to remember that sports organizations, their job is not to fight corruption. Their job is to promote, protect, and support their sport. And we have to find a way to assist them on that, in the primary objective. And so, a number of task forces set up. There's a steering committee recently set up, and we're going to have our first general conference on the 15th of December in Abu Dhabi. This is just before the Conference of States Parties to the UN Convention Against Corruption. Invitations have been sent to all governments about 2 months ago. So just to flag that, put that on your radar. That's something that will be more of an awareness-raising event, but it will be relatively high profile. We already have the president of the International Olympic Committee who is committed to be there, as well as the head of UNODC. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. And then nearly finished, just a quick word on technical assistance. So this is just moving that next step. So after showing, developing these tools, how do you actually use them? How do you actually fight the problem of corruption in sport? And I just wanted to flag an initiative that UNODC is doing along with the International Olympic Committee and Interpol. And here we simply go to countries at their request and support them in fighting, in implementing actually the resolution and fighting some of the problems identified or talked about today. So thus far, only in the last year, we've been to Qatar. We will be in Colombia, but that's more on a regional basis. Nigeria, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Indonesia, many more to follow. And there we go directly into the country. We bring together multiple stakeholders from sports ministries, ministries of justice, interior, as well as sports organizations, and walk them through some of the threats that they face and to highlight for them what can be done. And this is an important point, because even if, for example, like a match fixing, which you link it to illegal betting, they estimate the turnover alone is 1.7 trillion per year. 10 to 15% of that is just unknown. We don't know where 10 to 15% of all that money is going. That links into illegal betting, that links into money laundering, that links into organized crime. That's a huge, black spot that we know nothing about. We need to do more about. And you go into a country where betting is illegal, they say, well, it doesn't affect us. But actually, the reality is that you can see, even in countries where you're not allowed to bet in the country, people outside of the country will be betting on events or on sports events that are happening in that country. And you have to be aware of that. So let's say betting is illegal, so we don't have to worry about match fixing. Well, actually, you kind of do, because even on the principle that betting is something that's not happening in your country, there will be events on which some people are betting, and that opens you up to all sorts of different issues. And I think it's Daniela made a good point as well about e-sport and the future of sport. I mean, 100 years ago in the UK, for example, the most popular sport was horse racing. In Germany in the 1950s, it was handball. In Korea, people are being arrested and put into jail for match fixing in e-sport. So they're playing computer games professionally, and they're being caught. And I should say Korea is a unique example where e-sport is a second-tier Olympic game. But the point is that there's lots of money behind this. There's more and more money. It's huge. Like Europe, you have Ronaldo. In Korea, you have a guy who's playing computer games. They're the idols. And when you're linking that to sport as, where do we get our new idols, our new role models, our sports players? I mean, the next role models will be e-sport players. So I will stop talking now, and I'll finish just highlighting just our website. So all the things that I've talked about, the video, the links to the events, the guides, the resources, the resolution, they're all on our website there, unodc.org, Safeguarding Sport. It's an area we want to keep working on. We've been given the mandate to do so, and we're going to be faithful to that mandate. So on that note, I'll just finish by saying, when it comes to any of the issues talked about today, in particular technical assistance, should your country be interested, should you have institutions that are interested, please do not hesitate to reach out. We have resources there to immediately follow up, either in person or obviously remotely, but we can also organize workshops and trainings, so please don't hesitate to reach out. There's an email address, but of course, if you'd like to contact me directly, please don't hesitate. So thanks very much for your attention. Thank you again to Italy and to Russia for organizing. I'd be very happy to take questions if you think I could answer them. So thank you.
Almost out of time, and I know the ambassadors all have other commitments, but if there are any missions that wanted to ask a question or make a quick intervention, we do have 2 minutes left. Otherwise, I think we will save it for the next time. Please, Ambassador.
Before we leave the room, just to reiterate the invitation for the event in Colombia, that it will take place on November 18. Is the the workshop on sport integrity that we are organizing with UNODC, Interpol, and the International Olympic Committee. So you are more than welcome, and if you need further information, Andres Paredes will provide. And I was thinking, it has been a very good discussion, but I think that we can take a step forward, and let me propose something to the main table here, to Italy, Russia, and Qatar. That I think we could have a group of friends in the fight against corruption at UN, and to move this topic and to create more awareness, and only to have the support of UNODC. So in order to have these kind of discussions, because corruption has many ways to approach it, and many phases. Sports, one phase, but there are other phases. So we could have then a discussion and see how we can move forward on this topic. Okay?
Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And all of these are member states who are in the group of Friends of UNODC.
Yeah.
So I think that this would also be a very interesting thing to discuss. Thank you for so many concrete ideas expressed in this meeting today. Thanks to the 4 missions, to Qatar, Russia, Italy, and Colombia, to Daniel Abbas, and to my colleague Ronan from UNODC in Vienna. And we will continue the conversation in upcoming events, both on UNGASS generally, not just on sport, but other aspects of corruption. And we hope to see those from Capital, such as yourself, Andre, back here again, and also on the sports issue, including on the International Day on Sport and Peace for Development in April next year. Thank you all for coming. We're adjourned.